Here with us today, we have four great panelists, each with unique experience and expertise in conflict resolution. In this panel discussion, we will delve deeper into the intricacies of the neutrality dilemma. We hope that you will find the session thought-provoking, informative, and inspiring. Our second speaker for today, we have Honorable Dr. Sharif El-Negahi, joining us from Egypt. Sharif has extensive experience as an international mediator and ombud, a consultant, a law professor, an author, and a senior judiciary. Has served as a mediator and a dispute resolution specialist for the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the Global Mediation Panel of the Office of the Ombudsman for UN funds and programs. Sharif, thank you for being here with us. So the first question for Sharif is, how does the traditional notion of neutrality complicate the participation of dispute resolution professionals in speaking out against conflict, atrocities, and injustice?
I would like to start by my answer would definitely change depending which hat I would be wearing. As a human being, I would have an answer. As a judge or an arbitrator, I would have a different answer. But as a mediator, I would also have much different answer. So I will just focus my answer as a mediator. And before giving my honest opinion on it, I would like to just share with you several things about my background and how I have made this mentality. Most of my career was in the judiciary and acting as a judge. I have a certain understanding, just like Ken, I just had an understanding of the law based, or understanding of the justice based on the law. But when I try to examine mediation, I wanted to make sure that mediation can actually deliver justice. And that's why maybe I spent 6 years asking this question, can mediation deliver justice, throughout my PhD experience in the UK. And neutrality was quite puzzling to me when I've been learning about the concept of neutrality. And also in the beginning of my practices as a mediator, neutrality was really puzzling. Does it really contradict with the notion of justice? Does it complement it? Is it challenging? It was challenging. But then, with several mediation cases, and when I found that people are reaching to a settlement, all of a sudden, I started to assess this settlement. And I put my thoughts and imagination of, is this fair? Should I let them continue and close the deal with this kind of agreement? And sometimes I feel that, oh, this is, you know what, if this party went to the court, he might get a much better deal or much better judgment than the deal he's taking right now. If I help him continue the deal, would I be against my notion of justice, or my neutrality must keep me silent? And I spend a lot of time to try to find peace with this. And the way I have found peace is I actually went and asked the party, are you aware that you have other options? Are you aware that this is only one possible solution and there is other solutions and other methods you can actually go for? And when I've learned the answers of the parties, I have been in touch with a much more powerful value of the mediation, which is party self-determination. It's them decide. It's them, they would say, what works for us and what is fair and what is just. And it's not about me to impose, or it's not about me to translate the situation into a manner of fair or not. So what brings me to peace of mind is if the parties have an informed decision and they are aware they are free to do whatever they want throughout mediation, party self-determination would give my neutrality, my sense of seeking fairness and justice, a peace of mind. As long as this is what they want and they know that this is what they want and this is best for them. Applying this to your question, neutrality is not, it's only one side of the coin. If you need to add the other side of the coin, which is party self-determination, we before speaking up, we also need to ask about what these two parties want, what they feel fair or just, before I impose what I would like to see happening in the ground. And again, this is my answer as a mediator. This is not as a human being. This is not as a judge. This is as a mediator. This would be my answer to your question. And I would like to close my answer by a single thought. In my opinion, there is not a single conflict in the world, whether it's small or as massive and as global as it can be. There is no conflict ends by war and by violence. And look at history. All of the conflicts out there need to end by some sort of an agreement. And as a mediator, I've decided to not to speak my mind, hoping that one day at one of these big conflicts, parties would actually say, you know what, violence, war, we're not getting anywhere. We decided to sit down, discuss it, and reach an agreement, and we need to find a mediator help us. And I think as a mediator, the mediators who spoke their minds, I don't think they would be find neutral to assess such parties. They would really need a mediator who managed to keep their peace and understand that it's in the end of the day, if they decided to go to mediation, it's party self-determination along with neutrality.
Are you ready to become the change you want to see in your community or in your workplace? If so, check out our tailored workshops and mediation skills, training, and certifications designed to equip you with the practical skills to become an effective conflict resolver and a certified mediation practitioner. Now, let's get back to the show.
The other three panelists that we have today are, first, we have Joyce Mitchell. Joyce is President-elect and Distinguished Fellow of the International Academy of Mediators, 2022 to 2023 member of the ADR Section Board of the Maryland State Bar Association. Joyce has been a mediator since 1996. Joyce, it is a pleasure to have you here. Third panelist is Tina Patterson. Tina is the founder and principal of Jade Solutions, LLC, a woman-owned certified business with more than 20 years experience providing alternative dispute resolution and community engagement services. Tina, thank you for being part of our panel today. Finally, our fourth panelist is none other than Mohammed Kamal Hadi. Mohammed is a practicing lawyer and ADR professional. He is a certified mediator and arbitrator in the courts of Jerusalem and Ramallah. Mohammed is the founder and director of ACT Conflict Resolution, a Palestinian nonprofit organization. Mohammed, it is a pleasure to have you here. To bring everyone on the same page, what is neutrality? And does genuine neutrality exist for a mediator in any dispute?
This concept of disinterested and neutrality, I think they're so intertwined. Idea of being disinterested is often confused with being uninterested. Disinterested is really meant that you are an observer, that you are there not with a stake in the game, without desiring one outcome or another. This kind of ties into the neutrality piece because people frequently think being disinterested means that you're neutral. No, disinterested means that I am not showing any type of bias or desire for one group to have their way versus another party, or if in case of international conflict, that I am desirous of one group to feel that they have an advantage over another. This idea of being disinterested is often difficult, whether it's in mediation, negotiation, because it really requires that the person who is leading as this disinterested party, and whether it's mediator, negotiator, to constantly be self-aware. How much of your behavior, how much of your desires are you influencing? Are you influencing? Are you really trying to take the position of what's best for the parties? And this concept of fairness sometimes, especially since we're talking about international conflict, what we determine to be fair may not be what the parties determine to be fair. And it can be as simple as rights to water. We think that that's not what's the issue. We think that they want a written agreement. Maybe they don't. Maybe all they want to know is I can have access to this water 3 days a week. I can ride on this road between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. without any type of casualty or concern or safety issue. So this idea of disinterested, I think we frequently have an issue with it because we feel like in order for us to be disinterested, we have to be separate from showing any type of empathy. You can still be empathetic, but you can do so again with that lens of I am not trying to influence the outcome. I am trying to navigate or be that catalyst for the parties in question to achieve their desired outcome.
In your experience, Tina, what is the importance of being neutral as mediators?
The importance of being neutral as a mediator is it's paramount. It is literally the parties are looking to the mediator to be that individual who can help them determine what the solution to the problem is going to be. And it employs being neutral in our active listening, meaning that we don't filter. Reframing is an opportunity as well for us to be neutral. And I find this idea of being neutral, we think of it just in terms of the parties, but it also means self-reflection. Am I really being neutral? Am I really being open to what I'm hearing from the parties when I reframe? Am I using the same language that they've presented to me as I reframe back? Am I actually thinking, taking notes and listening to what's being said? Am I saying up front as we move through the process, whether it's active listening, bargaining, brainstorming, am I actually being, in this case, disinterested or neutral? And if I'm not, do I need to step back? Whether it's between caucusing, did I say something that was really coming from my own bias? And we haven't talked about this, but the parties are looking for us to not be biased, and it can change the tone of a mediation. It can make the difference between the parties feeling like you are listening, understanding what's spoken and not spoken. I think about this as well when I think about neutrality, and Westerners in particular, and I'm a Westerner, the opportunity to use our silence as a neutral and how that shapes the conversation. Sometimes the parties don't want anything other than an apology. And if we are so focused on what the end result is going to be, we miss that opportunity for the parties to say, I just want for Francis to say, I'm sorry. Or I really want to make sure that when I need to get to that watering hole, I can do so without being concerned that someone has set a booby trap on the way for me to get to that watering. It also, and I agree with a lot of the things that Dr. Cole talked about earlier, about being empathetic and being completely present. But again, that's back to that self-reflection. That's back to that self-introspection. And it's going. And it can sometimes be, I'll say it, exhausting, because you're holding the space, but you're also looking at where you are in the space. And saying to the parties, did I hear you when you said this? And going back and looking at what happens next. This one is literally, it's something that when I started, and I've been in this space now for close to 23 years, the idea of bringing our emotional intelligence, but also the self-reflection and how we integrate our emotional intelligence in looking at ourselves and the impact that we're having on the parties, I think continues to grow and continues to shift. I think we'll see more of this as we become a smaller community, even though we're still global. We'll see more of this conversation regarding how are you really being neutral? And when you're not being neutral, how to immediately shift course, or can you shift course? Can you, I hate to use this word, but I'm going to say it, can you pivot? And if you can't pivot, how can you be help to the parties versus literally deterring or detracting the process?
Thank you, Tina. Thank you. Our next question is from Mohammed. Does the principle of neutrality extend beyond the confines of mediation? And if so, to what extent?
Let me tell you a story regarding this issue and the matter of neutrality. I did my advanced training in Israeli Mediation Center in the west side of Jerusalem. During our training, we dealt with a lot of cases that the two parties are Israelis. So we were four. There was 3 Israelis, and I'm the only Palestinian with them. And To be honest, for me, it's my first experience. I don't know a lot about the Israeli culture. I'm new for all this issue. I don't know the differences, the culture sensitivity inside the Israeli culture. And I thought before that if there is discrimination from an Israeli, it should be against Palestinian. So during the mediation cases, I discovered that no, it's something even you can see it inside the Israeli culture. Somebody who's came from the west of the world have this view against another Israeli comes from the east of the world. And I started learn more and involved more and more. I faced one case that it was between one side who is Palestinian and the other side is Israeli. And I tried to examine myself. Am I neutral? I want to check myself. And I was very happy during the case that I didn't have any feeling regarding the nationality. So I was and I was all the time trying to test to examine myself how Muhammad will deal with this case. And in this kind of trainings we have two, we are doing the co-mediation, so we are two doing the mediation and we have another two colleagues are witnessing our what are we doing inside the mediation room. So the feedback was great for me that they said that and I asked, to be honest, how did you see Muhammad during the did you find that I'm not neutral in a way or another? So this is give me more power to continue. I will go to another example, but in this example I was delivering training and it was after the 7th of October. And back to what Ken talked about, the neutrality, or how can Israeli see anything from Hamas or maybe from Palestinian and the other side. It wasn't easy, and it's understood from my side for both sides. Even I'm Palestinian, but I can understand. It's not easy to understand it. So there was a video on social media after the 7th of October that he was kicked by Israeli soldiers in East Jerusalem. So I brought this video for the trainees and I said, think that you are in your way to the mediation. And 15 minutes before entering the mediation room, you open the Facebook, anything in the social media, and you saw this video. And in this mediation, the coming mediation, there is one side Palestinians and the other side is Israeli. How would you deal with it? What will be your decision regarding the issue? Will you continue and attend? Try to examine your neutrality. And I believe it's not easy, even if it's not the Palestinian, if the Israeli and he's kicked by Israelis the same. So it's not easy. I want to say that inside mediation, outside mediation, the neutrality is the most sensitive issue. Work and live with us as humans. I was thinking that we as people living in the Middle East, maybe we are more sensitive for some issues, but dealing with a lot of cases and with people from all over the world, we have point of views that make us with a big exam and exercise regarding the issue of neutrality. I believe that during this war that we are facing, what we are not seeing as much as we should in Sudan, and it's very big, but nobody are seeing what's going on there also in Russia, Ukraine. I think that if you ask anybody from the west side of the world about his opinion regarding Russia, Ukraine, who will come with an opinion. If you ask somebody from another place of the world about Israel, Palestine, he will come with his own opinion. The media are controlling everything in this world. So it depends from where we are taking and hearing our information. it affects our minds and our thinking and our neutrality. I believe it's exercise that we have to work on ourselves all the time. Every day we have to exercise ourselves to be sure that as mediators now, to be sure that if we find out that there is something miss our neutrality, we should go back and not enter to a dispute that we are not sure from our neutrality. I believe that, and I asked myself a lot of times during the war that we are living here, should I be neutral regarding the issue of Palestine-Israel? And I found out the answer, no, no. I will not ask Orit to be Palestinian or neutral regarding Israel. But we should think in another way to look together on a mutual ground, working together regarding the issue that we don't want violence. We should work together to bring both people for peace, for thinking non-violence, for thinking for the future, for the interest of our people.
Thank you, Mohammed. For Joyce and for Tina also, should mediators engage in interventions intended to address asymmetries in asymmetrical conflicts? Can and should mediators, in quotes, equalize the parties? And what are the risks of those types of interventions?
In the world, things happen, you're thrown into places and times when you just do not know what happens. And that's when we go back to who we are basically. And remember, we are not only people of the world, but we have set ourselves out as conflict resolvers for all people. And I say that because ever since my favorite Francis has asked me to be on this, I have struggled with, what do I say to you in the face of the fact that I have been chair of the Human Relations Commission in my community, and I recall taking my son to the various hearings that we would have so that people could talk about the issues, for example, gay and lesbians, and how they were affected on the beaches in Ocean City, Maryland, by people who would harm them. And my son wanted to know, who were those people? I said, they're the very people who walk next to us on the street, Eric. They turn into different individuals when they see something they don't like, and they violate someone else's rights. So that was why I held the hearings. I took my young son there to know that he had to hear all of that. That's an example of what we have to do in face of our basic, that we are neutral. What is neutrality? Neutrality is not appearing to promote, not appearing to, in a situation where you've been asked to resolve a dispute between entities. I do multi-party disputes, and that means I don't necessarily have one or two people with one or two confined premises or approaches. So I have to try to figure out, in doing those multi-party disputes, what are the commonalities here? What do they need to hear? Who are the persons in this room who can be heard? Because silence isn't always a problem. Silence is, who will people listen to? In some disputes, I will not be heard, no matter what comes out of my mouth. So as neutrals, we can remain out of the main dispute that we've been asked to resolve. But there are ways that we can be involved, because I believe in the basic principle of human rights for everyone. I am not happy with what's happening in the Middle East right now. And I was not very happy when people were walking here in the streets of the Black Lives Matter. But I had to learn about the intricacies of everything that was going on. And I was asked, during the times of the Black Lives Matter protests here in Washington, D.C., why are you not there in the streets? My being in the streets will not help. My sending my children there to be there, because they could, and the women who were there from my sorority, and helping them to promote who would be there to speak out. that was the role that I could play as a neutral, because I would not be heard. It was the young people of this community and of America who were speaking out at the time, and they could hear each other. They didn't want to hear an old white-haired woman talking about rights, because they thought I might go back to the civil rights era and talk to them only about things that my generation didn't quite deliver on. So as a neutral, this thing that we have in our canons of ethics, I'm a lawyer, and how we're supposed to promote whomever has hired us. For example, criminal law was the first shock I had, that if the court assigned me a case as in a criminal law matter, I was supposed to be an advocate for that individual, even though I may not like what he or she may have done. That did not sit well with me. It didn't sit well with me. And I soon learned that you have to pick the places where you're going to speak. You have to pick the places where you will be heard, and the approach. Now, let's talk about the words of our statutes, and you have them, those of you who are members of various states and organizations. You have the neutrality that you're supposed to maintain. I think that neutrality means that if you're asked to help parties resolve a dispute, then you must remain neutral in there. Do not forget, as a citizen of the world, you have an obligation, I believe, an obligation to participate in approaches that will help your position, your learned, educated, knowledgeable position, to be heard. Those are my thoughts, and I struggle with how to say that, because I know many of my colleagues who believe that as mediators and arbitrators, we should not be taking positions. But I have been a member of a Black sorority for 25 or 30 years now, and one of the things that we promoted was public service, and we had to go out and get people to come into hearings to present their positions at the hearings. And those are the kinds of things that we as mediators have to do. Educate ourselves in and out of this situation. And we can participate in public forums, if only to bring the people to the forum who will be heard by the people who need to be heard. Like most of you, I probably struggle with those. Now, with regard to what's happening in the Middle East now, it sounds like that is a dominant conversation that you have been having. I don't know that I will be heard on the one hand, but on the other hand, I tell you what I have been doing. My grandchildren, my daughter-in-law are Jewish. And each chance I get to explain to them why people are ugly at different times to them, why people are decent to them, why we could not afford to not have our menorah out front, as always. Because if you don't put it out there, you're silent. You're saying to people, this is who we are, and this is what we are about, and we believe in your rights to have your Christmas trees up, etc. So those are the kinds of things that I think that neutrals are obligated to do. Educate themselves about a situation, find ways that they can promote their position so that it will be heard by those individuals who may be causing things that are difficult in your, that hit your gut. And I just want to say that the one thing I know about the Israeli-Hamas situation, it's older than me. And I don't know the answers to it, but every day I listen to the news, I read news articles to educate myself, not only on the history of it, but the current things that are happening, and to realize that the war must end. There must be peace some way. But my saying it is not the voice. But what I have been doing is, obviously, I live in a community that is extremely Jewish, of supporting people who can be heard to get this done. And that's how I think we as neutrals do. We do not abandon our position as citizens of the world to demand rights and respect of each other. But when we are neutral, sitting in a situation where we are asked to help the parties resolve their disputes, it's not my dispute, remember, so I have no business having my position in that dispute. It's not mine. But when I'm doing a public facilitation, I get a chance to have a back and forth with people and to ask questions to jog them as to the reality of what they're saying and what can be possible. But I'm always trying to lead them to common ground. This is also the absence of silence. What we're doing today is doing a forum where it can be given to others to hear that we believe in a society in which we can live in harmony with each other, with respect.
Thank you, Joyce.
Thank
Tina?
you.
With regard to the asymmetries in mediation, some of the tools that I've used in the past have been in terms of the ground rules at the start of mediation, informing the parties that silence is okay, but also giving everyone an opportunity to speak. And this is sometimes where the asymmetry can come in for those who feel disempowered or that they don't have an opportunity to have their voices heard, sometimes asking and not in more from a position of inquiry instead of interrogation. Is there anything that you'd like to add? And then pausing, again, the gift of silence, to give that person an opportunity to speak. The challenge with sometimes dealing with the asymmetries is that one party, if they believe that the attempt to remedy the asymmetry is too frequent, they may, and I've had this happen in facilitation, your bias, that can be, again, it's about balance. How often are you calling on that particular group and saying, have you had an opportunity to say what you'd like to say? If they're not ready to speak or not interested in speaking, that may be the opportunity not to ask again. But this asymmetry, recognizing it is important, because if we are truly looking for, and I'm going to use a viable solution, we have to recognize that there's an imbalance, and that imbalance may be due to generational, it may be due to cultural differences, and cultural in this instance can be who speaks first. Do the elders in the community speak first, and then the younger people are meant to be silent, in which case we may have to ask the younger generation, is there anything that you'd like to add? Recognizing that there's an order. I'll share a story with you, and I'll be very brief about this. I had the opportunity to co-facilitate a meeting about a year and a half ago, and there were some asymmetries. And the asymmetries had to do with the presence of people from the global north versus those from the global south. And those from the global south were very concerned that their voices were not being heard. We sat down with the organizers and said, let's establish a protocol. So when it comes time to speak, who gets to speak first? Because the global south felt that the global north always spoke and was always heard. And what we decided to do, and I'll share this, it wasn't just global south versus global north. It was online participants versus those who were in the room. We established a protocol, and the protocol was that those who were online would speak first, and then those who were in the room would speak second. And within the room, global south spoke first, then the global north, and then we repeated the cycle. But before we could do that, we had to get agreement. And this is where dealing with the asymmetries is very important, getting the agreement from all who are involved so that no one feels left out, no one feels like they're being slighted, but it also addresses, we know that there's this imbalance. We see this both, and I've used the generational, but it could also be perceived or actual, who has the power. And it could be, again, I'm going to use the example of those who have means. So someone who comes into the room and has a lawyer versus someone who is not represented by a lawyer. In that case, what I will do is I will go thoroughly through the process to explain to the person what we're about to do so that there's no misunderstanding, but also letting everyone hear what I'm saying so that as we move forward, if we need to check back in, we can do so. So those are some things, but again, it's this fine balance, because what we don't want to hear is that the mediator is really biased or favoring one side versus another. But also, we don't want to have people come back and say, a decision, we came up with this solution, but you never asked the younger people, or you never asked the elders, or you didn't engage the women in the community.
Thank you, Tina. The next question is from Mohammed. Reflecting on history, what lessons can be learned about the dangers of silence and the importance of maintaining neutrality in current political conflicts, specifically in the Middle East and North Africa?
I think silence make the wrongdoer believe he is right. So we should stop silent regarding this issue. I don't want to focus again on the Palestine-Israel conflict. I want to focus more on Palestinian division. We are divided from 2006 till today, and all the time we are busy in our internal disputes, and because of we are spending all our minds and our power against each other, we lost a lot outside. We didn't examine democracy, our rights to vote from 2006. Nobody of us, nobody tried to say stop both in West Bank and in Gaza. What you are doing, you are looking only for your interest, internal interest. But what about the interest of the Palestinian people? This is one of the issues that I think part of what we are facing now today in these days. It's the price of the silence of the dangerous situation that we are facing and living during the. It's not only here. If you look on all the disputes that we are facing in the Middle East, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Sudan, Iraq, everywhere. It's because the people didn't talk. They didn't try to do any change. We spent maybe the last 40, 50 years looking for only to feed our people, our kids. That's it. We because there is a security states. We are always afraid from talking. This is very dangerous. People at the end, they will pay a big price. So I think that we should start talking. It's very dangerous to continue silence when we are dealing with dictatorial systems. We should say from my side as Palestinian, I should say divide between Palestinian, it should not continue. Continuity of occupation, it's something that it should stop. Both people should talk to each other, and we, the people, they have the voice to say stop corruption, stop divide, stop occupation, stop anything wrong against your people. It's the way to build the future, the peace, the dialogue, and the way it's clear. It's always clear. We have to talk to each other. We have to listen to each other, and we have to ask each other. And this is something I believe it's very important. When we talk to each other, we learn about each other. We learn about their fears, their interests, their needs, where they are, what they want to do in the future. Can we build something together? And I believe yes. Even when we are talking about Palestine, Israel, yes, we can live together. We can live in peace together. All people can live together if they come with a good faith, start building trust.
Are you ready to become the change you want to see in your community or in your workplace? If so, check out our tailored workshops and mediation skills, training, and certifications designed to equip you with the practical skills to become an effective conflict resolver and a certified mediation practitioner. Now, let's get back to the show.
We're going to move on to our final question, which is for all the panelists. And the question is regarding Desmond Tutu's quote of If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. What is our responsibility as mediators in such situations? And how does this responsibility play out in international conflicts?
To answer this question, it will differ. As a human being, as a judge, as a mediator, I would have different answers for each hat. And also this specific question, it differs if I'm a mediator outside of this conflict, this is my profession, or I am the mediator mediating this case. If I'm a mediator mediating this case, I believe I have duty to help the parties reach a fair settlement. This is my belief. A lot of mediators might not agree with me. I understand. So this is a debatable thing in the dispute resolution arena, especially in mediation. However, I believe that as a mediator involved, parties have came to you asking for your help to mediate their case. You have a duty to help, not only help them mediate, but also help them reach some fair understanding and settlement. Because I'm a true believer that you cannot truly settle a dispute without a feel of fairness, replacing all of the anger and all of the negative emotions within the parties' hearts. With this being said, if I am the mediator inside the mediation and I'm the one who's responsible, I will retreat to the parties' self-determination along with the informed consent. I will not leave the parties without an informed consent. I will use this as my effective tool to make sure to bring balance between the two disputed parties. That would be my answer. If I'm the mediator outside this conflict, it's tricky, to be quite honest. If you speak your mind, then you are losing your chances to be possible someone who parties can turn to you for help when they have reached, with their party self-determination, when they have reached the decision, we want to sit down and talk and settle this. If you have speak your mind, then you have jeopardized the possibility to actually aid the parties to do so. So that would also be my answer to your excellent question.
When I received that question, I was thinking about the mouse and the elephant and the foot on the elephant. And I go back to Muhammad, and I don't know if any of you watch cartoons, but eventually the cartoon animals talk with each other. One of the great things about communication and facilitation, even in the worst moments, if you as a neutral can get the people to talk, even about what is angering them. I may not like what you say, but I have to hear what you're saying. So that would be my approach to it. Because when there is a need to facilitate a group that is in conflict, and I've found that happens a lot. I have been on teams with mediators that have had to go in communities where there were major conflicts, and obviously they're the oppressed, the persons who feel that they are oppressed, and then the persons who are characterized as oppressors. But what do? We disperse out among them to get them to talk about their perspective so that they, first of all, can be heard. And we ask them then if they're willing to talk with any one or two people from the other side, just maybe for a spot of tea, just to do that. Notice the elephant's foot still on the tail of the mouse. However, we still want to talk. And I have found that, just as Mohammed has said, patience, persistence, guided intuition as to what the individuals are about, and are they being heard as to what they are about, so that someone else can hear them that needs to hear them. Then at some point in time, you put them together to talk about the differences, because you already know it. You will probably have developed trust in those side conversations and communication, and you want them to now talk with each other. You remember, you've had the side talk maybe with a group. You've had the side talk with one or two from the group. You've asked them to have tea with each other, just to sit. And you're hoping that you've developed along that line a lifting of the foot of the elephant long enough for them to see each other as each other and to see if there is an opportunity for them to work out sometimes just small steps that might lead to larger ones. That's my perspective.
Thank you. Mohammed?
I believe that such agreement will never live a lot after signing it. If it passed in that way that the elephant have all his conditions, our role also to evaluate the agreements and to bring people to think two sides, to think about the implementation. We can see from the past until now, a lot of agreements didn't manage to live because there was one side, the elephant, and the other side is the mouse. So I believe there is a role for the mediator to bring the parties to see the future of such agreements and to empower the parties or the weak party to know more about the future are waiting for this agreement. And I can tell a lot about a lot of agreements in the history until today that it's the easy part of the agreements is signing it, but the difficult part to protect it in the part of the implementation. This is very dangerous.
Thank you. Tina?
Bishop Tutu's comment is thorny because when we are talking about international conflict in particular, the idea of being neutral, we don't want to influence, but we also want the parties, the community, the individuals come up with a solution that is not just for the short term, but for the long term. And this is where I struggle with this, because if we as mediators, especially in international conflict, aren't aware of the antecedents that brought us to where we are today, we can actually navigate us back to doing the same thing, literally putting something together that is not long-term, not sustainable, but also is perceived to be either unfair or imbalanced. And this is where I think multi-track diplomacy is important, where we actually have the people, nothing against prime ministers, nothing against those who are in parliament, but it's the people on the ground who know what they need best. And it's the people on the ground who can say, this is what we need. This is the infrastructure that we need. This is what's really at the core of this conflict. I talked about access to the watering hole earlier. It could maybe the watering hole, but it could also be we need roads that don't wash out. We need to have water that we can get access to without having to walk 50 kilometers and knowing that we're going to a cistern that, depending on the day, is surrounded by armed soldiers. So this idea of if we are neutral, we have our foot on, we are aligned with the oppressor. I don't know if that's always the case. I think as a mediator, especially in conflict, it is our responsibility to help the parties, one, let those who are not empowered or don't feel empowered to have their voices heard, but also to think about the long-term solution. And what does that mean in terms of utilizing what's existing today? Bringing in a third-party solution when you have elders in a community who can serve in that capacity, again, means long-term.
Thank you, Tina. Do the panelists have any concluding thoughts that they would like to share with the audience?
My closing remark is not a single conflict would ever end without a fair agreement between both parties. War, violence have proven that they never end a dispute. This is not a way to settle and end a dispute.
Joyce?
Dialogue about do we remain silent in the face of conflict, it has to continue. It has to be a continuing dialogue because others will add to it and remind us of our ultimate responsibilities as people of the world community to speak out against injustice wherever we see it.
Thank you, Joyce. Mohammed?
I think that there is a role for mediators to do in the world. We should work together more, talk together more also. We are always talking about hearing, listening to the disputants, to the party, but we should learn from our experience. We should work together more, talk together more. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tina?
My final words would be La lucha continua. The struggle continues, but I would ask that all of us remain vigilant and hopeful, not just for within our own boundaries, but internationally. Our work is critical, vital to the peace in this world and the survival of humanity.
Thank you, Tina. And once again, thank you to all of our panelists.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can support us by leaving a 5-star review. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast to stay informed whenever we upload a new episode. See you in the next episode.